Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching a brand new edition of Policy Watch with me, Frank Pereira. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley on Thursday said that the fallout of demonetisation was on predicted lines and the economy will benefit in medium and long term. A day after the Reserve Bank said that almost all of the demonetised currency came back into the system, Jaitley said the fact that money got deposited in banks does not mean that all of it is legitimate money. He said demonetisation coupled with GST will give a significant boost to direct tax revenues as many people have come under the tax net. In the first segment of Policy Watch today, we will analyse the cost-benefit of the demonetisation exercise. Joining me on the programme today is Subhomoy, Bhattacharjee, consulting editor of the Business Standard. Thank you for joining me on the program. What are the cost benefits really of demonetisation? Up until now, analysts and economists were all saying that the numbers should come in front of us. Only then can we make a constructive analysis of how successful really demonetisation was. The RBI has put those figures in front of us now. What is your assessment?
Exactly. I mean, it's always better to run on numbers. So there was a short-term story to the demonetisation and there was a long-term story. Now, the short-term advantage which the government wanted to extract was that it helped that, the people who had black money would not be bringing that money to the bank counters, and there would be sufficient checks which would have been created to ensure that they would not be able to, they would be sort of reconsidering it and they wouldn't bring it. So the government could obviously show a huge difference in terms of the amount of money that was in circulation versus the amount of money that came in. That is what the finance minister is talking about. And it was expected to be around 2.5 to 3 lakh crore, which would not come back.
The windfall gain that everyone was speaking about in the beginning.
Right. Now, that has not happened. For very many reasons, we can go into that. But the point is that that money has come back. Now, it's nobody's case that in India, there's no black money. So to say that there was no black money circulating in the system is rubbish. Obviously, there is black money. The black money has come back. It has obviously ducked under the radar, and it has been able to cut through the banking system. It was always expected that the banking system would be the weak link in this thing, because the banking system in India is not really geared or equipped to handle this sort of a flow, and obviously their checks did not work. So the money has come. So the short-term gains definitely have not happened. The long-term, the money that has come back have now all come back with an address. There is a number to it, there is an address to it, there is a sender to it. Now, the point is that the finance minister is right, but it creates a difficult assignment for the government now to be able to find out that these numbers from where the money has come are those whose income or whose sources were illegal. Now, that would mean actually using a lot of big data, a lot of analytical things to be able to come to a conclusion, and that will take time.
Are we in a position to really sort this out, sort the clean money from the black money or the dirty money as you would call it? And how long do you think an exercise like this would take? Are we equipped to do something like this?
See, there are two things. First of all, this was an exercise without any example earlier. Nobody had done it. Second, the very fact that as soon as this demonetisation thing started, there has been a disproportionate rise in the number of income tax payers, both in terms of voluntary as well as those about whom information has been gleaned and information has been asked for. It's about 19 lakh people, 2 million approximately, is a huge difference, which shows that it has already opened up a trail. It has already opened up a trail where people and numbers can be seen, and those numbers are now sort of standing up as conduits to find out the black money. See, I had always held that compared to demonetisation, GST is a much more useful measure, and GST will automatically, by continuous series of checks and balances, do the work on black money ferreting out much more effectively, even at the very retail level, once the exemptions and others are moved out, than demonetisation would. So yes, the answer to your thing is that yes, the black money thing will be sorted out, a large percentage of it, but I would say the credit would go more to GST.
Rather than demonetisation.
Rather than demonetisation.
The government has come under a lot of criticism ever since the RBI made this data available and put it out in the public domain. Do you believe that the government can turn it around in the days to come?
Well, you know what, no, I wouldn't say days. You know, this thing would take a lot of time because already the benefits are coming through in terms of the additional income tax that's already come. Now, nobody pays income tax voluntarily excepting those who are salaried. So, the extra numbers who are coming in are basically those who are being told that their income is more than what they've accounted for. Connecting of that income with their other activities. So, you know, those connections and linkages are showing up. So, there is definitely a virtuous cycle that has been created. Also, and I will give the devil its due, that the government has not tried to fudge figures. You know, there was a lot of unaccounted commentary that was going along at one stage about government not giving out data. Now, that is nobody's case. The data has definitely been put on the public and it has been put out warts and all with very good granular detail. So, that to me gives a sense of confidence that here is a very good basis to study that what have been the shortcomings, what has been the advantages therefore, and what can be the steps forward. You know, that is very important, because without data it becomes a question of blind man's buff, and that doesn't definitely lead to very informed set of economic policy making.
You know, the GDP took a blow as a result of demonetization, and the latest GDP figures also aren't that great at the moment. Do you believe that the effects of demonetization are now behind us, or are we still, or is the economy still feeling it?
Again, two data. Yes, the GDP did take an effect, more because of the GST stocking, but the demonetization thing was definitely playing out. But if you look at the Nikkei PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index that's just been released today, that shows there's been a unexpected jump in the economy. So, the expansion has suddenly started taking place. For instance, Maruti Suzuki sales in August has been very sharp. So, car companies are...
That's also because of GST and the prices falling.
So, the prices had fallen. So, that's actually the positive effects are already starting to take effect.
Yes.
So, pharmaceutical companies are reporting that their sales have started moving up fast. So, the caution that had been created by GST, or you could talk about the fact that the inventory, the disruption that was caused by demonetization, that has been put back. The sectors where there will be a problem will be the real estate sector, where, which was very cash dependent, and that sector now with RERA coming in. So, there have been a lot of structural changes that have been brought about in the last 1 year, which people often don't tend to understand their implication, like RERA for instance, or the insolvency law. These things have tightened up the entire ecosystem in terms of not allowing too many leeway for crazy money to play around. That slush which was to be there used to actually hold up a lot of froth in terms of our GDP figures. That froth is not there anymore.
You know, the sector, like you rightly pointed out, that has been worst hit is probably the real estate sector in all of this as far as demonetization is concerned. Do we now see, some sort of a level playing field as far as the real estate sector is concerned? Housing is going to become more affordable, do you think, in the near future?
I would certainly think so. I mean, already, look at the major housing players. None of them are in a position to demand prices. They would love to, but they are not in a position. I mean, so many of them are heading towards bankruptcy.
Bankruptcy, yes. And several big companies.
And that was necessary to put in a touch of realism. Because people also, I must say here that that many of the people also unnecessarily tried to use the real estate sector as an investment platform, second house or third house, which obviously was asking for trouble. So it was a sort of a investment pattern which was being guided by factors which were not determined by fundamentals. So those factors would now be getting removed. So all the demand that was there for those sort of houses, therefore the luxury houses, the high quality, the high top of the, not the luxury, but the next rung houses, which are basically being picked up as a investment alternative, those demands would go down. So yes, affordable housing should get a larger play. Though of course there are lots of structural problems there which would take time, but I would suspect that this is one area where one should see a positive going ahead.
And what are the other sectors or the areas where you see a lot of positivity as far as demonetization?
Construction, road construction is one area where there has been a lot of good effect. You see, therefore, the demand for steel has held up, cement has held up. These are the sectors which is doing well. Pharmaceutical has started doing well. Then there are the sectors like automobiles, as which we already discussed, and now that is a very major employment generator. So these are the traditionally good sectors. The one sector which could rebound very sharp, there are some indicators, which is the hotels and the transport sector. That is dependent on tourism. That can be a very nice employment generator. But the GDP figures shows that there has been some amount of recovery there, but we'll have to wait a bit more to see, how far the trends look.
Fair enough. And finally, before I let you go, after seeing everything that's happened over the last 10 or 11 months since demonetization has taken place and looking ahead, do you believe that the positives outweigh the negatives?
No, certainly not at this stage. To say that the positives really outweigh the negatives would be too facile a look at demonetization. Demonetization was a gamble. Whether the gamble has been whether the gamble definitely
has paid off or not, I guess time will tell.
Yes.
Okay, fine. On that note, then we'll have to call it a wrap on this segment of Policy Watch. Thank you so much, Subhomoy Bhattacharjee, for joining us on the program and putting things into perspective for us. It's time for a short break now. Still to come, Union Cabinet approves an ordinance that raises GST cess on luxury cars and SUVs to 25% from 15%, taking the total GST on such cars to 53%. What will the impact be? That's what we will discuss on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Art arisen from a multi-hued cultural canvas. Tradition and cultural fervour dating back centuries. And encircling them all, there's a magic that awes. Embrace your nation's brilliant human warmth. Watch Colours of India, Sundays at 9:30 p.m. on Rajya Sabha Television.
Taking its name from the abundance of semal or red silk cotton trees that bloom vividly here, the Simlipal National Park is home to 3 of India's biggest animal species: tiger, Asiatic elephant, and gaur. Spread over a sprawling area of 2,750 square kilometers, set on a wide expanse of sal forest, this park is nestled in the very center of Mayurbhanj in Odisha. It is one of the most breathtaking nature reserves in India, with forests, grassy meadows, and some beautiful waterfalls like Joranda and Badehipani. It is also home to an astounding 1,078 species of plants, including 94 species of orchids.
Welcome back. You're watching Policy Watch with me, Frank Pereira. The Union Cabinet on Wednesday approved an ordinance enabling the government to raise the goods and services tax cess on medium to large cars and sports utility vehicles to 25% from 15%. The ordinance is expected to precede a 9th September meeting in Hyderabad of the GST Council, the federal body that decides on all indirect tax matters. At the meeting, the council may decide where to finally fix the cess, which is now at 15%. The move is aimed at restoring tax revenue from the automobile industry that got affected when the federal indirect tax body fixed the cess at the current level, leading to price cuts across various models in the initial days of GST's rollout. In our next segment, we will analyze the ethics and economics of higher tax on fuel guzzlers. Joining me on the program now is Chetan Chauhan, Deputy National Affairs Editor of the Hindustan Times. Thank you for joining me on the program, Chetan. What do you think of the Cabinet's decision to go ahead and add this additional cess or pass an ordinance where an additional cess can be decided on these luxury vehicles and sports utility vehicles?
When the GST regime came, I think a discrepancy crept in when the taxes for vehicles were introduced. They were flat 15%. In the earlier the VAT regime, the tax was about 28 to 30% for high-end luxury vehicles, for mid-car segments, for guzzlers. So I think the government has removed the discrepancy and had tried to restore some sort of an order. It cannot be that high energy consuming vehicles, luxury cars, guzzlers, high emission emitting vehicles can be taxed at the same level. Small and medium cars, which is for middle class, which are much more energy efficient than these vehicles. So I think the government has taken a corrective step by introducing this sort of a cess, and it is secondly, it is sort of a disincentive for people who are trying to buy these luxury cars, because with this cess there will be a difference in tax regime for electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and the normal fossil fuel based vehicles. So the government through this ordinance will provide some sort of incentive to people to buy environment friendly vehicles.
But is the incentive enough to buy some of these environment friendly vehicles? Because at the end of the day, they too are quite expensive when you go out there into the market and look at the prices.
No, I think one, cost is a factor, is a very extremely important factor, which is a reason that large number of people don't buy. But second is the infrastructure. Except hybrid vehicles which can run on electric power and fuel, electric vehicles we don't have the charging stations like in US, California.
We don't have the infrastructure in place.
Yeah. We don't have the infrastructure in place. So without infrastructure, you cannot have any incentive for any sort of a vehicle. If we have charging stations in cities like Delhi, Bombay, maybe Bangalore or even Chennai, then people will buy them, even if the cost is higher, because in the longer run people realize that they will save much more if they buy an electric vehicle or energy saving vehicle, because the prices of fossil fuels is rising. Today petrol in Delhi is almost 70, which is very high, even if the crude oil price is not so high, because the government has imposed taxes to cut its revenue. But people, I think the government policy on this needs some sort of a change. We need more incentives. We need, under the Make in India policy, incentive for company to come here in India and produce electric vehicles and these sort of vehicles, because as of now most of the vehicles are being imported.
Sure.
When they are imported, the import duty is very high. So unless in Make in India the government gives a push, we will not see a reduction in prices in I think in coming few years.
But the car or the automobile lobby is something that the government has to deal with as well, and that's an issue as far as any government is concerned in the future, because there are certain big wigs who will not want the electric cars to do well.
Definitely they are, because one is the fossil fuel vehicles, the technology is well established. It has been for now decades. They have producing units similar all over the world, so it's not difficult. In case of electric vehicles, in case of cleaner fuel vehicles, the technology is new and the production cost is also very high, and the market is uncertain. You don't know, you set up a plant in India and people don't buy, so it is not a certain market. But for fossil fuel vehicles, there is a certain market. It is growing at 8 to 9% every year. So you know that if you produce these many cars of fossil fuel, it will sell. But electric vehicles, cleaner vehicles, it is difficult. And secondly, unless the government provides tax rebates to manufacturers, they will not come. They will have to provide some sort of a tax relief so that they come up in India, and the infrastructure, the municipal bodies will have to provide infrastructure to run these vehicles. If you see maybe in Paris, electric vehicles, the tax is written on electric vehicles. So every parking station has an electric charging station where they can charge, they pay money for it, a nominal price, and they can charge the vehicle while it is parked. So that sort of infrastructure the government, the municipal bodies will have to set up. Only then we can say that in the 5 years or next 10 years, electric vehicles or clean fuel vehicles, there will be some sort of success for them.
You know, rather than working on infrastructure to develop, better vehicles or better charging stations for electric vehicles, why don't we work towards a system like they have in Singapore or many of the European countries, where you have a robust public system in place and you do not have to depend on your own vehicles to travel from point A to point B. For instance, in a city like Singapore, it's extremely difficult for for someone from the middle class to even purchase a vehicle because the taxes are that high. They encourage people to take the public system, but that's not the case in India. Why can't we move towards a system like that?
No, there are two things in the public system. Now, like in Delhi, Bombay, there is a public alternate transport system that are taxis. And the buses are not good, but taxis are there. But a large number of taxis run on fossil fuel.
Yes.
So, if you replace your vehicle with a taxi, the net impact on city's air pollution is nil. In fact, it is very high because a large number of these taxis come from places outside the city to the city for getting business, then go back, and they travel around the city also without even passengers. So, the net impact is very high. The congestion is increasing in the cities. So, I think for the government has to come out with a policy that if they want to register a cab, it has to be electric vehicle, it has to be a cleaner fuel vehicle. In Delhi, it's mostly CNG, but in many other places, it's not. So, I think some policy incentive have to come. And second is last mile connectivity. That is one of the biggest issues. We have taxis from going here to there. But if I get down at a metro station...
Yep. So that being my point, so why shouldn't we work on an infrastructure to develop your public system, public transport system on the whole, your last mile connectivity and everything, an integrated, transport system, public transport system?
Under the Smart City project of Government of India, there's a lot of emphasis on this. But sadly, the Smart City project is only for a few number of cities. Even in cities like Delhi, it's only for small areas. So, if you want to really work on it, it has to be replicated in all the big cities in a big way, in which last week a mile connectivity with cleaner vehicles has to be there. And there has to be a huge disincentive for people to register more than one vehicle. I can understand that a family of 4 needs a car, they will. But if they have a second car or
but
a third car...
But they don't need 3 cars.
Yeah, they don't need 3 cars. So, there should be a disincentive for second car or third car. Like places in Delhi, maybe Bombay, one should not be allowed to register a car maybe in Gurgaon or Sonipat or Noida, second car or third car. There has to be a software system where a person who registers a car outside Delhi and using it in the city, it should not be allowed. Under the motor vehicles law, there is a provision that if you are running a car with the outside registration number for more than 6 months, it can be cancelled. It has to be transferred.
Sure.
So, it does not happen. So, there are many corrective measures which have to be taken to have a public transport utility system. And one more thing is that if you want public transport to be there, last mile connectivity to be there, you cannot have taxis, autos on the roadside. You have to give them a proper parking space.
Sure.
In most of the Indian cities, there is no parking space for public transport vehicles, including passenger vehicles like taxis, autos, maybe e-rickshaws. They are all of them form part of a public transport, which is last mile connectivity. So, if you really need a change, there need to be change in the mindset of policymakers, and we need urban planner policymakers in municipal bodies rather than bureaucrats who come there for 2 years and then leave.
Sure. Coming back to the cess now on these luxury vehicles and SUVs, do you believe, like the GST regime has a tax on sin goods, so do you believe that these luxury vehicles, fuel guzzlers and SUVs should be put under that category and probably a sin goods tax for these vehicles as well to deter people from buying them?
Surely, the fuel guzzlers, the diesel vehicles which are the biggest polluters should be considered as under the sin tax, because the impact on health is as bad as smoking. Because if you are in a city like Delhi in winter months, in a day you are smoking no less than 1 packet of cigarette.
Just by breathing the air.
Just by breathing the air. So, it's no less than a sin tax. So, I agree with you that the government should impose a higher tax on energy guzzling vehicles like diesel vehicles, and there should be some sort of a provision on registration of these vehicles also. The policy of Singapore or some other countries that only if you deregister a vehicle, you be able to register the next one. That sort of policy Delhi needs to be introduced for all vehicles, especially.
And the sin tax can be used for infrastructure.
No, the sin tax which is introduced by the Supreme Court is being collected by CPCB, and Central Pollution Control Board has come up with a new mechanism where this money will be used for air pollution abatement infrastructure in city like Delhi. As of now, this thing is only for the NCR region, so it will be used in NCR. It will be used for creating parking spaces, public spaces, walking spaces, more monitoring stations. So, first time this sort of money is being collected outside the air tax ASS. So, but we have to see how the money will be utilized.
Indeed.
Whether it will have some sort of impact. But in Delhi, I think by this winter, the monitoring will improve manifold because the number of stations are going to increase in the courtesy Supreme Court order imposing cess on high fuel guzzling vehicles.
Okay, on that note, we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of Policy Watch. Chetan Chauhan, thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, that's all the time we have today. See you again next time.